الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم لعن إسرائيل وأمريكا وحلفاءهما وانتقم منهما الذين يقاتلون أولياءك في غزة ويقتلون الأبرياء والأطفال والنساء والشيوخ والمستضعفين في غزة وفي فلسطين وفي اليمن وفي لبنان وفي كل مكان. اللهم شتت شملهم، اللهم مزق جمعهم، اللهم خرب بيوتهم، اللهم دمر ديارهم وزلزل أقدامهم وأنزل بهم بأسك الذي لا ترده عن القوم المجرمين. اللهم لا ترفع لهم رأيا ولا تحقق لهم غاية واجعلهم عبرة وآية للعالمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في غزة وفي فلسطين وفي اليمن وفي لبنان وانصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم وألف بين قلوبهم وأصلح ذات بينهم وسدد رميهم وسدد خطاهم وسدد رأيهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في غزة وفي فلسطين كلها وفي اليمن وفي لبنان. اللهم فرج عنا وعنهم، اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم أدخل السرور على قلوب المسلمين في غزة وفي فلسطين وفي اليمن وفي لبنان وفي كل مكان. اللهم تقبل شهدانا، اللهم ارحم شهدانا، اللهم اغفر موتانا، اللهم اشف جرحانا ومرضانا وفك أسرانا واصل كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين. اللهم طهر الحرمين الشريفين من رجز آل السعود وطهر المسجد الأقصى من رجز اليهود والسيهون والأمريكان. اللهم نتوسل إليك بشهداء غزة أن تقبل دعانا وتحقق رجانا، وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم آمين يا رب العالمين. So we continue our reading of Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. And we stopped here last time. Lam Iqbal said that I made it clear that I hope I have made it clear that to you that the ontological and the teleological arguments as ordinarily stand carry us nowhere. As ordinarily stated, carry us nowhere. And the reason for their failure is that they look upon thought, that is reason, because these are rational arguments, as an agency working on things from without. That's very Hegelian viewpoint. Because let's say from a Kantian viewpoint, for Kant, for example, and I take the example of Kant because he sums up Cartesian tradition, its critique. So Cartesian tradition has two streams, empiricist and rationalist. Locke, Hume, etc. And rationalist tradition, Spinoza, Leibniz, Wolff, etc. And Kant sort of, I shouldn't put Wolff there because he's more like a Leibnizian rather than original Cartesian. And Kant sort of synthesized these two traditions and critique them and try to come up with a new synthesis. And the reference point for Hegel is Kant. Obviously, Spinoza as well is very important for him. But Kant is his immediate background, I would say. Not immediate, but, general background. And for Kant, thinking is, thought is, there's a basic dichotomy between thought and senses, in a sense. And senses, I mean, just to be crude, has a direct contact with the object, even though it's not entirely true. But let's say that. Thought, on the other hand, is sort of the thought for Kant is basically concepts, inference, and ideas. Although inference and ideas, they're all related. Um, and our access to the object is through thought in combination with senses. There's no access to object, direct object, or direct access to object in Kantian term. And Kant sees it as in a way, veil between us. At least this is one very persuasive reading of Kant. Us and reality, veil of thought and senses. And for us, ultimately, there's no way of knowing whether reality is. We don't have any way of knowing reality as it is, unless we become a totally different type of creatures. Because our openness to reality comes through thought, which is a mediated access to reality. So that's a one view, one reading of Kant. And Hegel's criticism of Kant here is of the basic idea of thought, criticizing the basic dichotomy or dualism between thought and things. For Hegel, there's no veil between things and thought, because ultimately they are self-expression of the same reality. And Allama Iqbal is, in a sense, working with this idea, this Hegelian idea. It's in a sense a pantheistic idea. Spinoza had a great influence on Hegel, and the idea is that the reality, ultimate reality, or the absolute, is historically realizing itself, and matter and thinking are expression of that reality. And if they are expression of the same reality, then they are not fundamentally dichotomous. They are not alien to each other. They are expression of, or self-expression of the same reality. That's a basic idea, Hegelian idea. And I think in these lectures, especially in the first two or three chapters, Allama Iqbal is working with this idea, and there's no wonder. There's no what's the word I'm looking for? There's no. This makes sense because Allama Iqbal was educated in British Hegelian tradition of his time, and McTaggart was one of his teacher, British Hegelian, and I'm sure he studied Bradley, if not with him, among others. Okay, so when he's saying that, and the reason for the failure is that they look upon the thought as an agency working on things from without. So in that case, they're thinking of thought as outside God, for example, or outside the universe. This view of thought gives us mere mechanician in the one case and creates an unbridgeable gulf between the ideal and real in the other. One is, I guess, an ontological argument, and the other is teleological argument. It is, however, possible to take thought not as a principle which organizes, that's the Kantian view, and integrates its material from the outside, but as potency which is formative of the very being of its material. So if thought is creating its material, not our thought, but the universal thought, then we can partake in that thought and see somehow reality from within, and that's where intuition comes in, a direct. I mean, you have to work on concepts and things to get access to that object, but it's not impossible if thought and the material you are working on are of the same material, ultimately of the same stuff. And Hegel shows in a way in his phenomenology, and as I mean, however persuasive you feel it is, or you think it is, in phenomenology generally, and in his logic, Hegel gives us from two different viewpoints the way we can do that, and obviously Hegel, I mean Iqbal works with that idea. Doesn't mean that he is follows Hegel in all those points. He combines his own tradition with those points. And there is a mysticism in Hegel as well as Allama Iqbal. But obviously, Allama Iqbal and Hegel would consider mysticism and all these as mysticism and its method as not totally opposite to, as he argues, and he already has argued in chapter 1. Because if the reality is one, if thought and material on which thought works is of the same stuff, then intuition and thought, there's no dichotomy. They're just different way of looking at the same reality or the self-expression of the same reality, depending on how you want to look at things. Okay, so that's why he's saying it is possible. It is how possible to think thought as a principle, not the principle which organizes and thus creates a veil between things itself, but um, and integrates its material from the outside, but as a potency. So this is again Hegelian and Aristotelian point, and obviously Aristotle also had a huge influence on Hegel. So he uses here the concept of potential and actual. So let's take material as potentially, and so the difference between thought and the material it works on is that of gradation, the level of actualization and potential, not that of dichotomy. So, but as a potency which is formative of the very being of the material, then you can have a better access to the absolute reality in that way. in a Hegelian way. So that's why Allama Iqbal started with emphasizing the notion of experience, because you can actually experience the reality from within rather than merely um, relying on mediated thought or uh, one-sided version of thought, which sees thought and things or thought or the reality as two different things or two different natures. Thus, regarded the thought or idea is not alien to the original nature of things, it is their ultimate ground. So the absolute is actually thought, which is self-expressing itself at different level and constitute the very essence of their being, thought. So Geist is, or the absolute reality is actually um, a thought, absolute, infusing itself in them from the very beginning of their career, inspiring their big career, because things are developing as well, because they are developing their if they are self-expression of the absolute thought, then they are developing, and they are developing historically according to. So this quest for the self-expression. So our quest for understanding the absolute is, in a self, in a sense, the quest for self-understanding, which is in turn part of the quest of the absolute for its own self-understanding or self-expression, depending on how you want to spin the story. So infinity from the very beginning of their career, inspiring their outward march to self-determined end. So that's the march of history. Very Hegelian. But our present the dualism, our present situation, meaning when we are looking from a finite point of view, we see it as dualistic thought. But if we see things from a universal point of view, from historical point of view, from the point of view of the reality itself, there's no dualism. Maybe we will stop here and we'll continue from this point next time. Yeah, but our present situation. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك صلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.